Although you have just given me one of the best corporate insults ever, which is maybe you should try using AI a bit more.
Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini. And this week it is a bonus episode which follows up our Telecoms mini-series that we've released over the course of this year. And I am delighted to say we've got the GSMA with us, and they're going to be giving us a perspective right across the telecoms industry. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Esmee van Rob.
And I'm Rob Kernahan.
And as typical with our telecoms episodes, we have got our guest star with us, Praveen. How are you doing? Praveen Shankar, good to see you.
Not bad. Absolutely excited about going to a photography workshop for a week in the Isle of Mull. So cannot wait for that.
Wow.
Mate, you pulled that one out of the bag.
Yeah, indeed.
That sounds really nice.
It is going to be a wildlife photography workshop.
Oh,
that sounds really fabulous.
That's going to be one hell of a slideshow. Sit everyone down. Now the next 2,000 slides. Open her up. Yeah.
One seagull.
And there is no telecom connectivity in that place. I have heard. Let me see if there is one or not.
Well,
Let's check that out.
I think we might get some insight in this episode about when that might happen. And I'm delighted to say that joining us today is Vivek Badrinath, who's the Director General of the GSMA. Vivek, how are you today, and where are you talking to us from?
Hi, I'm very well. Thank you very much. I'm talking to you from our headquarters in London, in front of the Thames.
Wonderful. And it's a sunny day in London.
Pretty much. Yeah, better than yesterday, indeed.
Yesterday was cold. It was unseasonably cold, wasn't it?
I thought it was all right. It was still a crisp day, nice and bright, blue sky. Completely blue skies today for me here as well. It's a lovely, it's been a lovely week.
I made a terrible error though. I just sort of
the one, Dave. Just the one.
just one at the beginning of the day. Anyway, I just went out in a shirt, and it was a little bit chilly by the end of the day. I will say that.
You are from the north of England, though. Your genetics.
I'm not built for it.
So, but you should be built for it. You should be able to just go out in a t-shirt in the middle of winter. What are you doing, Dave? You've clearly softened in your older age as you've been down south too long.
That's right, mate. That's right. That didn't take very long. Praveen, frame us up. What we're going to talk about in this special bonus episode.
You know what? Why don't I quickly recap? In our podcast series, Reimagining the Telecoms Industry, we speak to a few of the brightest minds of the telecom industry to get their perspectives on the why, the what, and the how to change and reimagining. As a context again, telecom sector is yet again at the crossroads. On one hand, we see that digital is driving our economies. Telecom sector is the backbone of the digital economy and is a critical national infrastructures. Customers do trust telecom companies. On the other hand, we see that growth has been elusive for the sector despite huge spend on networks. Costs are high, non-traditional connectivity providers are putting pressure. And finally, and the most alarmingly, customers see telcos more and more as commodities. There is a need for the telecom companies to go back to the drawing board and have the courage to re-architect and reimagine themselves across a number of pillars, all at the same time. Growth, simplification, network transformation, data and AI, regulation, hence this podcast series, one for each of these pillars. I'm truly excited about today's bonus episode as we have no other than Vivek Badrinath, the Director General of GSMA with us. Thank you, Vivek, for joining us. We are absolutely delighted. Off to you, Dave.
Before we dive into the subjects that we're going to talk about today, let's start with the GSMA generally and what its role and purpose is, Vivek. Do you just want to frame that up for people who might not have heard about it?
Yes, thank you very much. The GSMA is the industry association of the mobile industry. GSM was founded close to 40 years ago, and since then the operators have started to work together. And as we are their industry association, we take care of a number of things for them. On one hand, there's still a lot of technical work to be done on many aspects. And of course, the GSMA has been at the heart of making the roaming ecosystem work, working on the standards and the technology. So we run close to 1,000 meetings a year, bringing together about 6,000 people on a number of technical areas that are intrinsic to the mobile ecosystem. We also advocate for our members through, I would say, a whole policy framework. We engage with governments and regulators to share the practices that enable the industry to progress and grow. So we tell them when there are certain policies that work better. And we demonstrate the importance of mobile connectivity in general for the economic growth of the countries. When you have a strong and thriving mobile industry, the digital ecosystem is able to develop on top with applications, with services, with customers who are able to take part in the digital economy. The third thing we do, and we do at scale, is a role of convening as a platform with our events. The most well-known one is the Mobile World Congress, MWC Barcelona, which is the largest event in this sector. This year we attracted 109,000 attendees from 205 countries. And it's not just the mobile industry getting together to meet with itself. It's 60% of the attendees come from adjacent industries. And they come to engage and dialogue with the mobile industry. The next event we're having is MWC Shanghai. We are also very excited about Doha that we're opening from this year, and Kigali, where we bring together those interested in mobility, in particular for Africa.
One of the things that really struck us in the couple of times that we've been to the Barcelona show is how broad it was, that it had turned more into a broad tech conference than as much as it was a mobile or telecoms conference. How intentional was that scale?
Very much, very intentional. I think you're spot on. Getting the association to meet with itself is not what we're trying to do. Barcelona and all the MWC event series are places where business gets done, and business gets done between different parts of the value chain. You have suppliers to operators, but you also have users of connectivity solutions looking to work with the mobile ecosystem to define the right solutions. And if you look at the MWC Barcelona event, it has grown and expanded over the years to new dimensions. In fact, you have the core conference, which is a huge stage for dialogue around what technology is doing. But you also have meetings, commercial meetings. You have a whole startup scene with our 4 Years From Now event, which in one hall brings together more than 1,000 startups and more than 50 billion assets under management to dialogue around how to develop the future new technologies. We also launched Talent Arena this year, bringing in young people who wanted to get exposure to what's going on in the tech world to evolve their careers. So I'd say it's a platform. It's an efficient platform where people like to come. It's the rendezvous at the beginning of March for this whole industry, which is being read in a broader and broader sense. We also meet industrial players. And as you remember, 5G has a lot of industrial applications, which means that the car industry, the aeronautic industry, industrial factories, ports, they will need more and more connectivity for their business, and they come to our events to talk to the players of the connectivity systems.
One of the things we thought was a very resonant theme, whether it was something that was just emergent or whether it was an intentional theme, was the notion of sovereign AI and how sovereign AI and just data sovereignty and cloud sovereignty in the current geopolitic was really reframing a little bit the role of the traditional telco. I wonder if you'd observed that and whether you had any thoughts on that trend.
I'd say the AI revolution is a core part of what is impacting the telcos. And the telcos have been quite proactive in this. There are a number of geographies where the telcos are key players in, I would say, the provision of digital services. And they are indeed very linked to sovereignty issues. Why? Because they're regulated, because they're local, because they don't get... they can't delocalize themselves out of the country. They can't just migrate themselves completely to the cloud in another place. So I think the telcos definitely have an important role to play in supporting the development of AI. Many countries have concerns and are asking questions. You see the matter of sovereignty in Europe with the different standards and the creation of various sovereign AI technology stacks. And I think that's typically telcos are interested in these opportunities because they feel they can play a role, and they are a trusted partner both of governments and of enterprises, and that's positive. At the same time, there will be localizing a data center in each and every country may not always be possible because of infrastructure requirements. So the free movement of data remains a question that needs to be addressed.
Vivek, on that sovereign AI, what do you see as the role of the telecom sector? Is it just to provide infrastructure or go beyond that?
If you look at the B2B space, I think it's fair to say that telecom operators have long been a trusted partner of many enterprises for many of their digital needs. So I think they are a legitimate part of that conversation. When you look at cloud services, when you look at helping companies to connect and transfer their payloads to the cloud, you do need to look both at connectivity and at storage and compute. And it's that simple. So are they part of that triangle of providers? I think so, indeed. It's connectivity infrastructure, but it's also services on the B2B side, and it's also in some cases hosting and security.
We do a paper every year with tech trends, and one of the big trends that's been emerging for the last few years is everything connected everywhere all at once. And it's the role of the merging of the concept of connectivity and compute. And this, again, puts telcos right at the heart of digital futures of countries, and basically your compute doesn't really work as well as it should if you don't bundle it with the connectivity and the concept of fixed and wireless and all that sort of stuff. I think the telcos are starting to realize that, and the B2B point coming up is there's a different market for them to enter into. There's a diversification of services that they can offer, and I think what I saw at Mobile World was a new excitement about getting out of the traditional role that they play and into something much more progressive towards how it benefits the macro system. And I think we're seeing a lot of moves in the industry around that. I'd be interested in your perspective on that diversification of the business portfolio that they present back to the market.
Well, I think with 5G, there's been a lot of thinking about what the network can do more. And that obviously means that you need to understand what it's used for. And if you look at slicing, which allows you to look at mission critical applications. If you look at the low latency of 5G, which allows you to, for instance, do a quick turnaround on sensors or on images that you see and feed AI, I think the network has a lot to offer that we hadn't thought of before. So it's not just connectivity, first of all. So the network can do more. And then operators then can do more in terms of leveraging the power of AI in particular on the compute side. And we see a number of initiatives from operators, both for their own needs, but that's one thing, which is very important because we're a big tech-intensive industry. And so using AI to do our job better is obviously a good step. You work on improving operational efficiency, customer service, internal processes. That's all. That's there. But moreover, there are a number of initiatives that are taken to, I would say, bring the power of AI to the customers. And there's some subjects that actually operators caught first. If you look at, for instance, language, AI has been largely designed by the big players on languages such as, I would say, English, French, Spanish. That's fine. When you start to go to languages that have less speakers, if your AI has a very basic translation mechanism, the quality of your inferences is actually pretty bad. And what we did, for instance, we discussed this with the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, and Vion went and developed the Kazakh LLM, which is actually very precise and efficient for the Kazakh language. And you have a number of initiatives in that area. And as you know, and you do notice that operators are typically interested in these initiatives because they're relevant for their domestic operations.
Right. I just want to take a step back and go just briefly back to the role of the GSMA. And you talked about one of the major roles that you play is connecting up mobile operators in a way that creates kind of connectivity, interconnection, etc., etc. I wonder, in your head, how close to perfect we are. Like when you look at that situation, what strikes you as, oh, we've really nailed that, that's working really well, and what strikes you as missing or not working very well at the moment, and what upside would the consumer feel for fixing some of those problems?
Now, I would say we've reached, this industry has reached a certain level of maturity. I think every time you get off a plane in a different country, you can't help but think, okay, this is not bad. I've got access to my email and it's sitting in a server the other side of the world, and it pops up on my phone before I even reach customs, right? So that's something that I think this industry has done overall pretty well, but it requires ongoing work to put in place the roaming agreements. And every time the standard evolves, every time we add new features, we have that challenge again of making it work across operators and across countries. So at one point it was phone calls needed to work, then SMS needed to go through. Now it's data that needs to be seamless, and it's voice over LTE. So the new voice technologies, they need to work in roaming. So the job's never completely over. There's always things to fine-tune. And then when devices develop new capabilities, when eSIM comes in, there's always things to do so that it works well in the same way across the world. So I would say it's an ongoing business that we try to evolve. On top of this, we do have a lot of activity as well to ensure security of our systems, because the other part that is ongoing is that you will always have threats that you need to plug. And working as a community, working as an industry with the common, I would say, motivation to provide security to our customers and ensure the trust in the industry means that you put in common the information you get. So you don't keep to yourself a threat that you've seen. You share it with the other operators so that they can also fix and protect their systems if there's an attack. So I think the whole security angle is one where we play a big role, and and sadly, that typically is a never-ending story, because there's always new threats and new attacks on various bits and pieces of the very complex ecosystem that serves 7 billion people today.
You are certainly right in saying that it's easy to take for granted the kind of ubiquitous access and the very smooth transition between geographies and different networks and things like that. But there is another aspect to this, isn't there, which is like the digital divide, which is when you have this technology, you forget that you're privileged to have it, and actually there's a whole section of the world at the moment that doesn't. So what's the current state of that?
That is actually one of the biggest areas of, I would say, both hard work and opportunity for us. Globally, there's 3.45 billion people, that's 43% of the global population, who do not use the mobile internet. Right. So they're outside. That's what we call the connectivity gap. Now, when you break it down, 350 billion people, and that's just 4% of the global population, still a lot, aren't covered by mobile networks at all. So that's what we would call the coverage gap. There's no mobile network where they live. That's 4% of the population, 350 million. So it's big, but it's only 1/10 of the 3.45, right?
Right.
So my math is not quite precise, but that gives
you
the scale.
I'm not going to pick you up on it. It's early in the morning, and it just went right past me. Bang on.
Yeah.
This isn't a podcast known for detailed accuracy.
No, but the numbers are pretty much there, right? Yeah. It is. So that means there's 3.1 billion people who have mobile coverage. There is a mobile signal where they live, but they're not using the mobile internet. That's 9 times more. So it's when you're discussing, but we need to bring mobile to everyone, the first thing is bring mobile to those who have coverage, and also address the coverage gap through any technology that's efficient to do that. But that's only 4% of the population. Now, if we were to be able to close just the usage gap, that's the 3.1 billion people who could use a smartphone if they had one and they had the skills and will to do it. That's 3.5 trillion to the global economy by 2030.
Wow.
In particular in low and medium income countries. So that's a lot of money that the economy could benefit from, because they would be using mobile internet like other people to access services, to provide services, to access knowledge, to access work, and improve their, I would say, their activity by joining the digital economy. So two other things. Women are overly affected by both the coverage and the usage gap. In fact, there's about 19% more women that don't use the mobile internet than men. So there is a gender gap within the usage gap. And actually, the reasons are well known. We studied this in 2024 and boils down to what? Affordability of devices, big area. So when you see countries that still tax smartphones as if they were luxury items, when in fact they're now very low on the Maslow pyramid. They're something that people need to be able to access a good part of the economy, government, education, health services in many geographies, including the emerging economies. Well, taxing phones is not a good idea. Finding cheaper phones and cheaper financing models are indeed very, very helpful to bridge the usage gap. Then there's skills. And so we provide internet toolkits to help people understand how to use the mobile internet safely and effectively, so that you can do something useful with it. There's also, in some cases, lack of local language services that make mobile internet relevant. So they're big effort as well on our side. And then you have issues such as cultural issues around, I would say, online safety, and that's also an education matter that we try to promote. So that's where we take a keen interest in the usage gap by addressing these various pillars. And certainly affordable handsets, the financing of handsets, circular economy with the transfer of handsets that have been used and then refreshed, refurbished, and can be redistributed. The accessibility of lower cost devices with adapted specs. These are all opportunities for us to bridge the usage gap.
And when you say that, the amount that this technology can add to an economy, it's strange that they want to tax. They should really go to subsidizing to boost the economy. So it's turning the concept on its head and saying we need to connect our population because actually it's going to do so much more for the country. And I'm wondering when that shift might occur. There's a very clear argument to say, look, everybody should have this capability. Let's use it. But it's that mindset shift that needs to happen within those societies to say, yes, we should be there.
We're partly on the path. I mean, South Africa seems to be ready to remove the luxury tax on expensive smartphones. First example, MTN just announced devices at $5 for customers.
Wow.
To drive, which means that there is financing, subsidizing, and so on going on. Yeah. To a certain extent. Not all countries are as far, but this is our campaign. This is what we advocate across the African continent, across Latin America, across the Asia Pacific, because and we are getting a good understanding. But then it's about implementing programs that are, I would say, reliable enough that the benefit does go to the right people and is used in the proper way, right? So that's what makes it hard. But the governments understand it, but then sometimes the harsh reality of taxation and balancing the budget stops them from going there. So it's our job to go and tell them, well, this is actually priority one. If you do this, your tax revenue will go up in the future because your economy will grow. But that whole cycle is what we spend our time convincing them on.
Vivek, what role do you think the satellite companies can play in bridging the digital divide?
So you'll recall that in my mathematical breakdown of the connectivity gap, there's 350 million people who don't have coverage. So in that space, if satellite can be available, there's certainly a benefit. So let's get it right. Satellite is and the progress that's been done on the satellite industry, with which we've been working for many years, both because we work on spectrum, but also because many of our members have partnerships with satellite companies. Satellite is a very relevant technology to reach those places that mobile has not been able to reach so far. And by not able, I mean it was not affordable, it was not economically relevant to go and put an antenna in a remote area for very little traffic. But those 4% of the people live in places that are typically sparsely populated and often difficult to reach. So satellite, for the 350 million people who are in the coverage gap, there is relevance there. But let's understand, these are also often places. I mean, in some economies, they're sparsely populated, but the people have the means to buy devices and equipment. But in the emerging economies, typically these are the affordability of devices that work with satellite becomes the immediate second question.
When you look at a time frame for maybe not closing the gap to zero, but say halving the gap that you describe, what kind of time frame do you think we're talking about? Is it years? Is it decades?
It's years. I hope it's years. That's what it is. Look at the way this industry has evolved. I think when you start to see $5 handsets in South Africa, when you see governments one by one saying, yeah, we need to do something about it, when you see the Affordable Device Coalition that we're part of, together with the World Bank, with the ITU, there is a movement that is collecting momentum. Yeah. So I think there is a will to execute this. And this industry has done some pretty remarkable work over the years. I mean, it's reached on a common standard. We've got 7 billion people using devices to access mobile networks that are built on pretty much one technology. Yeah.
But it's that thing about we've sat and expect. So to today's point, you've gone through a lot of mobile phones. We've had the privilege of this for such a long time. We've seen such a big iteration in the capability of the devices, and yet it's still stark to think there's so many people out there who don't have access to the most basic of capability that those handsets. But I mean, if you go anywhere in the world, going back to your roaming point, my phone can connect, and I get services that if I didn't have would be a bit perplexing. So like just the simple mapping applications that the geolocation provided through the device that converge, then the mobile internet to load the data, the ability to search and find. Without that, it's much more difficult to get around the world. And yet
it's not only that, Rob, when and I know you don't do this particularly, but when things like your visas and your travel documents and your travel requirements and the things that you have to do, like during COVID, for example, when you had to go through kind of checking processes, all of that is online.
It's all device centric, isn't it?
You are disadvantaged very significantly. It's not just that you can't get to, kind of funny cat pictures. You're fundamentally disadvantaged in terms of the things that you can do.
No, that is the point. Yeah, that is the point. If you look at education, access to education, access to health, and because in advanced economies, indeed, being locked out of the digital economy is really I would say a big handicap. In emerging economies, it's simply accessing jobs as well, or trade, or mobile money in many cases, which means the ability to transact and actually earn a livelihood.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, let's move on a little bit and actually just talk about the sort of the technological advancements that's going on within telecoms itself. We obviously talked about what AI is doing. We touched on that briefly earlier. But when you gaze forward 5 years, what do you think the kind of other major disruptive and emerging technologies are?
Well, we discussed AI, and I think indeed we're at the beginning of measuring the impact of AI into our industry, both inside and also the impact on our industry of the growing usage of AI. So I think that's definitely front and center. Another area indeed is the satellite, the progress on satellite. There's some new services that were not possible a few years ago that are becoming possible, such as direct to device, and a number of operators are looking at that. Why? Because it helps take care of the coverage gap. So rather than building expensive towers in remote areas, customers use satellite for emergency calls typically, or short calls or short messages, and indeed for other applications such as sensors, telematics, and so on. In the next release of 5G, there's some services that can be used also over satellite. So we continue to work to leverage the extra coverage that satellite brings to enhance services. And then there's as of February, there are 99 telecom operators who already provide satellite connectivity through one or more partnerships with satellite companies. So that's becoming a part of, I would say, the telecom operators offering for all natural reasons, also because we understand it. So we've got quite a few partnerships there. But I'd like to say the rest of the other big trend that I think we need to embrace very strongly is opening the mobile ecosystem. Why? Because applications will not rely uniquely on connectivity, but they can definitely be stronger if you have access to some of the services that the networks provide. So our Open Gateway program is extremely important to us. It's really one of the big initiatives. Why? Because this is an area where, by leveraging the capabilities of networks more strongly, many more positive outcomes can be delivered by partners, by developers, by IT companies, by service companies.
Just characterize that a little bit for me from the consumer perspective. So how would it show up to me?
So it is, you know the API economy. So you don't sell an API to a consumer, or otherwise there's something seriously wrong with your business model, right?
Unless you're a very specific type of consumer.
Yeah. Customer, yes. Consumer, maybe not. Yeah. APIs are offering the ability to developers to access deeper resources in the network. So I'll give you two big examples just to illustrate the case. If you look at fraud and scam, for instance, we have a number of APIs that work on checking, for instance, if a SIM has been swapped, which is typically a case where a phone that's been stolen is used to do transactions using your bank account. Or silent identity checking, which allows you to check that without having to go through the whole send an SMS, retype the number, etc. We've got a number of APIs in, I would say, the fraud and scam space, which on their own won't protect you completely from fraud, but shared with a bank, shared with a financial partner, help them to do the score and launch the flags and alerts that say, wait, this thing doesn't work. So in the UK, for instance, with the banks, we have this fraud and scam alert system where typically when you have an application push payment, if there are things that we see through the network that don't look right, that helps the bank to say, wait, this thing doesn't look right. Let's not let through this payment. So that's the whole space around identity, location, all the information that we have from the network that allow you to typically work on the legitimacy of a transaction. Another example is quality on demand. With the features that 5G brings, it's also important that developers be able to, I would say, access higher quality systems, higher quality network capabilities for specific needs. You're a camera operator for a TV channel on a live event. The camera that is filming the main picture should get all the bandwidth. Right. Which means you need to be able to ask the network, make sure I have the fastest connection on this camera. And at that point, you give them quality on demand. But it could also be for a payment system. You've got payments, you're processing payments, people are walking past you for a big event and you're selling every 5 seconds. You really don't want to be waiting 20 seconds to process an approval on a credit card. For that time, for that device, not huge bandwidth, but good latency and certainty, at least that you have enough bandwidth to get your transaction done, you get it from the network by accessing an API. These are just two examples, and I'm trying to describe what it does for the consumer at the end. But of course, that's not the network and it's not the consumer. In between, you have people who are building applications that use these solutions. So we're opening up to offer our capabilities as an industry. We think it's a huge opportunity, and we're rolling it out country by country with operators getting on this bandwagon because it's an opportunity for the whole ecosystem to grow.
Yeah. So On that one, Vivek, this is absolutely agreed. This is a great opportunity. Do you think that the execution of this is going at a speed that you would expect? And what telcos need to do to execute it quickly and also make it easier for their consumers to consume that information and data?
So we're doing. You've seen APIs. I mean, API programs are typically partly evangelization, partly training, partly ease of use and consumption. And there's been a lot of progress done on this program since the last 2 years. But one of the keys, indeed, and we recognize it as an industry, is that all operators in a country need to be using the same API, and that's the journey we're on. We're working on champion countries where all operators do it. Why? Because otherwise, it's not as efficient for people who are using the APIs. If I'm a bank and I use silence authentication, but it only works on 2 operators and not the third one, well, then I need to provide another system for customers of the third operator, which makes it much more clunky or less convenient to implement in my systems. So I think one of the keys is indeed that the country operators need to offer similar syntax APIs to people who want to develop services in their markets. We have done a lot of work to standardize them. We're using the Camara framework, which is a community which develops these APIs. So they are the same across the world, which makes it easier for developers. We present and drive training sessions around this for developers. We do hackathons with them during our events. So there's a pretty strong open gateway activity typically in our events, but it's also at a local level that it needs to be done. We've actually worked on the demand generation as well through a program we call Fusion, where we work with different industries to aggregate demand because they have similar needs. Take the banking industry. Of course, when banks have similar issues in terms of fraud and fraud protection, we try to look at solutions that can work for all of them and evangelize in quotes, or let's say explain, share, and disseminate case studies to help people to pick it up. I'd say the momentum is picking up as we're reaching more and more countries. 70% of the connections on the planet are provided by operators who've started to offer open gateway APIs. So it's not that the machine is not moving ahead.
So collaboration within the sector is extremely key, and especially within a country to make this happen. I think that's a great point. Beyond the collaboration across the ecosystem within the sector, we have to collaborate.
And we have to work on both. And we are definitely motivated to work on both.
I want to maybe bring today's conversation to a bit of a close by talking about another deployment, which from a consumer perspective does seem to have been going on for quite some time now, especially in terms of getting the full benefit of it. I wonder what your take on the 5G rollout is and where you perceive where we're up to and what the challenges have been in deploying that technology.
Yes, I think 5G, let's remind ourselves what 5G does. 5G is a technology that followed on the very successful rollout of 4G, which was the technology used for mobile broadband, for the generalization of mobile broadband across the planet.
4G,
and I think we know what that did.
It was the first one that really felt like a step up in performance when you, from a consumer perspective.
From an advanced consumer perspective, you're absolutely right. So you were frustrated that your phone was not quite fast enough, and 4G solved that. So indeed, you felt the difference. 5G was about 2 things: a bit more spectrum, indeed, in the 3.5 gigahertz band, in particular in several geographies on average. And that was why? Because 4G was successful, so you needed more bandwidth.
Right.
Because people were using it a lot, right? And the growth was high. So we needed to put more spectrum to work for mobile broadband. So that's one aspect. And that's largely being used, right? It's that growth curve is progressing. And as it progresses, the 5G spectrum is being put to very relevant use on the B2C side. But it's not a sea change. Candidly, you're getting mobile broadband, slightly lower latency, so quite nice, but not life-changing. The real benefit of 5G and it was designed that way, was around enterprise applications. And that's why 5G embeds technologies such as slicing, such as RedCap that's coming forward for low-power IoT devices, has the ability to cover private networks in certain cases, lower latency. All these things are really more for the enterprise. Now, you well know that enterprise applications have a different rollout cycle than, let's say, a global launch of a new device technology. If you say all my high-end phones are going to be 5G from now on, and you advertise for them and say your life will be better with 5G phones, and they've got new features, over a few years in advanced economies, you're going to get a pretty high adoption of 5G. For enterprise, bringing slicing, but that means also going through the whole cycle of putting in place standalone 5G, which is the one which allows you to put all these features to work. That takes longer because you can put the connectivity solution, but if nobody is building the application on top, it takes longer. And so I think we are very clear that 5G was going to take longer to achieve its full potential because there's simply more people on the chain that need to do some work to use it and consume it in the proper way. That's why we do Open Gateway as well, because Open Gateway is one way to project, or let's say put forward, the 5G capabilities for people who use them for business applications. But you need integrators, you need software developers, you need industrial players to really use 5G to its full potential. You need to roll out 5G SA, and that's indeed only partly done. At the end of 24, there were 326 live 5G networks globally, of which only 61 were 5G standalone. So that's the next big thing, and that will drive 70% of the enterprise revenue expansion for the industry to 2030. So that's the next hurdle, in quotes, getting through rolling out SA and standalone, and then using it, activating it for real applications. But it was always destined to take a longer time to reach full potential, in my view.
What you been thinking about, Ez?
Well, I've actually been thinking about mobile world, as we've been talking about it as well in this conversation. The power of the ecosystem. I think that was one of the things that we actually felt when we were in Barcelona, opening up the ecosystem. So I think that's wonderful. But I think I'm also very intrigued by what Vivek just mentioned. If there's already so many people that are able to have internet, but they're not using it, then you're really talking about a usage gap, right? Maybe even an empathy gap, because you're touching upon culture, constraints, so many elements that tech is probably not going to solve, or at least not the tech itself, but the way we actually make it impactful, that's where the real magic happens. So I was wondering, how do you shape that ecosystem in terms of not, that you're not building it for them, but with them? So with community builders, with teachers, with community builders even on the site, on spots, so that they can actually co-design relevance. And I'm really, I think this is a thought I'd like to explore. Could empathy become a strategic KPI for telco? And how do you see that happening? What's your thought on that, Vivek?
I think you're spot on. And one of the programs that we're very proud of is our Mobile for Development program. So we have the GSMA Foundation working on micro projects with local players and a lot of local startups that build applications in low and medium income countries. So we have a lot of work in Africa and Asia Pacific in particular, Bangladesh, Tanzania, across the African continent, really a number of geographies where we bring together an operator, a startup, or a technology and a community to go and roll out these solutions. What it does is it gives real localized proof points. So it's not that we're pushing, please have a smartphone because you can do lots of fancy stuff that we do in Europe or in the US, but it's about this is relevant for you because you're into farming, into agri, or this will help you when you need access to medical advice and you're in a remote area. This will give you access to educational material. All these areas are areas where we work. We've also been quite successful with mobile payment, which is one very good reason to bring a phone into the hands of people and then help, and then they can walk up the chain of more applications. So I'd say our mobile phone development program is one of our prides. It's been effective. It's been effective with local entrepreneurs, and I think that's been a big part of its success. And we continue to do calls for proposals, to look for new companies to support, especially in their initial phases, so that they can bring solutions to these economies to justify, I would say, to bring more reasons to bridge the coverage gap, the usage gap.
And I think, there's a really good point there, which is when we sit in our context, it's obvious to us, but the ability to make payments, mobile technology facilitates a completely new way of business interaction where you can get away with the traditional, and it's second nature to us. But sometimes you forget the fundamental things that might be missing in certain societies that this technology can bring to them. And, we said about the trillions of potential untapped just through the addition of these basic digital devices.
Absolutely. And I think our queen, our Dutch queen, is a very huge fan of micropayments, and that opens up so much possibilities also for women to start their own businesses. That's a life changer in itself. And I think that's a beautiful example of how tech can really be impactful in those countries. Yeah.
The fundamental enabler to so much more potential, isn't it? But you forget this building block that once it's there can create so much potential.
And for us, it's like water, right?
Yeah, it's just there. It's just we just know it's there. You switch it on. When the mobile phone network goes down, which is very rare these days, it's hugely resilient from that perspective. And when it does happen occasionally, or you get a blip, or you're out of coverage, you see the frustration on some people. It's just, I need this service. It's gone.
Indeed. I think we've the period during COVID and has shown how important it was to enable to keep the lights on
100%.
And to keep society moving. And I think that's been a big realization.
Well, look, wonderful to get such a broad and deep insight into how the entire industry is functioning and how it might evolve, and some of the things that it does that you might not expect, just like that last bit of conversation. So Vivek, thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. It was great to see you.
Pleasure.
Now, we ask all of our guests at the end of this podcast what they are excited about doing next, and that could be a professional thing or it could be a personal thing. So Vivek, what are you excited about doing next?
Excited about our next event. I'm going to Tashkent next week. Tashkent in Uzbekistan.
Oh, wow.
That's a region of the world where there's a lot of growth and initiative. And I'm looking forward to meeting with the policymakers, the operators there, to discuss how we can double down on the digital ecosystem there with all the new applications that are changing society in the Central Asia region. And looking forward to the trip, looking forward to the beautiful country of Uzbekistan and being in Tashkent again.
Yeah, I always like trying food when you go to a new destination like that. So yeah, wish you very well.
Thank you.
If you would like to discuss any of the issues on this week's show and how they might impact you and your business, please get in touch with us at cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We're all on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to connect in DM if you have any questions for the show to tackle. And of course, please rate and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us improve the show. A huge thanks to Vivek, our guest host Praveen, sound and editing wizards Ben and Louie, our producer Marcel. Well, let's not start with that. And of course, to all our listeners,
you can strike that from the record for this podcast. Let's be honest.
He added negative value
with us in heart and mind.
Massive negative value.
Yes, but he's with us. That's not. You're okay, Marcel. And of course, to all our listeners, see you in another reality next week.